well, it's home, boys, home. Home I like to be, home for a while in the old country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree, they're all a growing green in the north country.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Nathan. And thanks to anybody that ever decides to listen to this. It's just part one of maybe, hopefully, a series of conversations between myself and my father, who is on my right, your left, Edward Fergus Johnson. You're very welcome, and I'd just like to give the listeners a gist of, well, where it all began. For me, the memory that, or the story that sticks out most is how close the train tracks were to your house.
Oh yeah.
So where was that, and where it all began?
It was my home where I was born, reared in Kilroot, about 2 miles outside Newton Butler and about 3 miles from Clonus. That was the address, Kilroot. And a more prominent one is up in Carrickfergus now, where they have quite a large power station, but we had no such thing resembling that back then. My father was, having returned from the war, got a job eventually as a railway worker, a navvy, if you like, and he reared 6 children there, which obviously I was one of them. I was the last, therefore the youngest, and you mentioned how close we were to the track. I estimate no more than 2 metres the window of the house would be from the track. And that particular house, I recall, its foundations was actually sleepers from the railway line, and probably used ones, but it was definitely sleepers, and it was a single, it wasn't brick, it was a rendered wall, so blocks of some description were used. Wood floors, very cold in the winter, although there was a fireplace in each room, if you could afford, or if they could afford to have the fuel to burn in them, but was mainly turf at that point in time. Yeah.
Clipping back to there, you said when your father came home from the war, what age did he go to the war?
Well, my father was born in 1895, and he went to the war fairly young, well, obviously very young. When he had gone to work, or had to go to work, so his brother could stay at school, and he worked for his keep. He got no money on a farm, and joining the army, or going to, whatever age he was, 17, 18 years of age, I'm not sure. It was an improvement from what he was doing, as he thought.
Yeah.
And I think the wages then from the army was 6 a day.
Were you, so to speak, born in that house, or was that the first house?
Yes. There was no hospitalisation there, and it was all of the children most around that area, rural area, would be midwives would have come in, and that would have been it. Yes. You went to school there. There was no preschool or anything like that. You went straight to primary school, and the first school was in a school called Clonmullen. It was a one-room, shack is a very good word for it, but the 2 classes, there was the infants, obviously, and all that separated them was just the desks were turned around and were back to back. So you had a senior teacher teaching children that were probably 10, 12 years of age, and 4 or 5 years of age, as I probably was then, was taught by another teacher, and you overheard everything that was going on with both teachers, obviously. And it was just an unbelievable introduction, in as much that this teacher that was teaching the older people, she was whacking all around her and shouting and bawling, and that was the environment. Yeah.
Brutal, eh? What a lovely introduction, as you say, they want to learn.
But it wasn't long there till I moved to St Mary's School then in Newton Butler, and and there was about 2, 3, 4 rooms, I think, in that school. Much better school capacity wise, but.
I remember you telling me a story about your mother paid cash for your house. Was that that house?
Yeah,
or was that
well,
the
you
one
see, she looked after the gates, so the house, the railway house, became free. That was, to her or to my father, because he worked on the line. Obviously, he wouldn't have had the railway house if he wasn't working on the line. But they didn't have to pay rent because she had opened the gates for the traffic that would go up and down the lane. There was about 4 or 5 more houses on that lane. The railway house being the first, and you would have to open the gates for the tractors or horse and cart or the odd car. They were rare that would traverse up and down that. But when the railway closed, I think it was 1956, 7. I'm not sure. Called the GNR, Great Northern Railway. They had the opportunity to buy this house, and they paid £100. My father paid £100. Mother and father. My mother was a great manager because my father had so little salary, and the elder children sent money home, and my mother, being very frugal, was able to save money, believe it or not, and they paid. Obviously, there was no such thing as mortgage. That word was never mentioned. I never heard of it. So he could borrow money. You borrowed nothing back then, and they borrowed nothing from anybody. And the same was any neighbour. It just wasn't done. If you didn't have the money to buy it, you didn't have it. And then they were able to sell that house for £300. And my mother then was able to, she had the money again to buy a bungalow in an address called Carrigan's, which was about maybe half a mile from Kilroot. And they paid £800 for that bungalow. Yeah, that was it. But of course, none of them had any running water or electricity or anything like that. There was there was nothing like that there. It was a tilly lamp for light, and that was it.
So they used to switch on the lights to light the tilly lamps, is that right? And then turn off the lights.
No, there was no lights to switch on. There's no electricity, you see. There was no. You lit the tilly lamp when it was getting dusk, perhaps, you know what I mean? And that was methylated spirits was used to heat up the stem, so the oil that you pumped the oil, it was paraffin oil, which is the same oil as you use for your heating, by the way, today, 28-second oil. So it was called paraffin oil, and you put pressure in the tank, and that pressurized the oil, and the heat where the oil came up, it vaporized the oil, and you got a light, a flame.
Well, I mean, apart from going into all the brutal side of school and school days, when you got to be a teenager, when did you start working? And I remember we watched a TV show not that long ago and worked out that it was essentially slave labour that you were doing in terms of what they quantified as you say, you were just earning enough to keep.
Ignorance is certainly bliss. We didn't see it as slave labour. It was an opportunity to get out of school. I got off the train going to school. I hid my school bag behind a heating pipe in the train, because the carriages then were individual carriages. So there was no corridors that you could walk up and down and enter a compartment. You entered the compartment from the platform, and that was it. You couldn't come out of it till you got your destiny. But I hid it there, and I got out at Listonskey, and I walked up that town, and I called in at least 2 shops, and eventually I came to a shop called the Old Corner House. It was a pub and grocery. And there was just a wood partition between the two. And Mrs. McBride interviewed me, and she told me later she thought I'd have made a good priest, but I don't know where. She was doped at that point. But,
is that an insult or a compliment?
Anyway, but she gave me the job, and I had £1 a week and my keep. That was living in an attic above in the house, and we shared a bed with another man, Philip Mulligan. He was about 4 years older than I was 16, So, but there was nothing untoward about the like of that. You know what I mean? Paedophilia or any of these things, it just didn't. It didn't. The word wasn't known. It's as simple as that. And obviously, it came to no harm whatsoever. But salary was eventually raised to £2 a week. But it was 5.5 days work. It was a half day and all day, but it was very heavy work. Alternating between the bar, I used to bottle 44 dozen half pints of Guinness every week. Bottles had to be washed, and so on.
And then you're talking about literally bottling from the keg.
I'm bottling from a siphon. You'll see one down there in Arnoldstown, John O'Kane's. The siphon, it was called, you know what I mean. But you had to wash the bottles, hang them to dry, and then put them in the case, then do all that. And then when you had to cork them as well, of course. Corks were soaked in warm water, and it was a manual machine, foot operated. And you put them in the case, and you had... I'm not sure it was a dozen or whatever was in the case, and you carried them up about 14 steps. You put them in a cupboard because they couldn't be drank for at least 2 weeks.
The cure.
So the stuff would settle down. If you drank it too fresh, well, you would have bad bowels, as we say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was going to say there. So if people wanted to see something similar to that corner house, there's actually a replica of something similar.
The shop in Newton Brother was Riley's grocery, and they also had a pub, of course, again attached to it. There was a time when there was no partition between either. At one time, the law changed apparently, and they said, well, we must put some partition between these boys drinking and the food and everything. But you have to remember, sides of bacon, they just hung from the ceiling then, in muslin. But Lord, that particular shop was transferred to the American Folk Park, where you'll see it, Riley's, and in the ledger there, and all the bits and pieces were. It was Lord, what do we call him? Lord Aaron, and his groceries and all that it's written down what they had and so on.
Was that the pub where there was a row or something? Is that what made you leave the pub business then?
No, well, you see, there was often a row, and I was listening to ski, and there was quite often, obviously, people got inebriated and out of control at times, and especially if there was an argument over perhaps football and even religion on one occasion, and it wasn't good times then, because there was trouble then as well. That was 1956, 57. There was quite a lot of trouble. Famous songs like South and O'Hanlon. I mean, I was standing about 4 Mile when that happened one night, in Brookborough, where those men died. Yeah. They approached the barracks and shot it up, and I think the word was that they were expected and whatever. But anyway, that, as I say, there was lots of nasty things going on, as I say, at that time. Yeah.
I'm trying to cajole a specific story. Was it about a local politician or councillor or something? He was arguing with a local drunk in the bar, and
he was actually a B special. And there was a character who come in to the pub then, and he had a bandage, a white bandage, wrapped around his head. He had been wounded in the war, a bullet through the jaw or something, and anyway, the jawbone had collapsed, and to hold up what was left, he wore this bandage, white bandage, and they called him Winkers McFarland because of the bandage that he had him, But he got into an argument with this boy, and again it was hot and heavy in religion, and I went down. I was on my own at the time, and I shouldn't have been, but anyway, I was on my own. This is the middle of the day actually. And I went down and said, look, peace here, stop this, carry on. And the guy turned, he became nasty, and what are you going to do about it? And he got up and they were on drunk anyway. But there was a big ashtray, and there was, as there was many on the table, you know what I mean, and with the various Guinness logos on them. I forget now exactly, but he came for me, and when I lifted this thing, and I hit him across the head with it, and he went down. And of course, this guy could have murdered me, you know. I mean, he was a full-grown man, much stronger than I. And so I screamed then and shouted for Phil Mulligan, who was over in the grocery. So Phil, he was a lot heftier, maybe heftier than this policeman. So he even grabbed him and threw him down the stairs, other about 4 stairs, and put him out on the street. But the next morning, 2 detectives arrived up at the bar and marched me down the street to intern me and question me. And about this guy that I had, you know what I mean. And of course, they weren't prepared to listen to anything I had to say or anything else, you know what I mean. And but again, I should not have been allowed. I was underage. I should not have been brought to the police barracks on my own as well. So, but anyway, that was it. Yeah.
I suppose you joined the army long after that, then, was it? The Irish Army?
There was no opportunity. See, you have to realise, so 6 of us, but everyone emigrated. There was no opportunities there, job-wise or training-wise for that matter.
So tell us a little about that then, I suppose, without them being here to tell us. There's, I hope I got this right, was it Nora was the eldest, then
Willie? No, Rosaline was the eldest.
Sorry, Rosaline. Then, go ahead.
It was Rosaline... my brother Willie,
yeah,
and Nora, Kathleen, Margaret, and I.
And every one of them except you had already left.
Oh, Ireland. Absolutely, yeah.
And so you were the baby of the family, and I know Kay left when she was what,
18?
19, and that would have been 1948 or 49. I can't remember. I think it was a year's difference.
Yeah. There was Kay was 11 years older than I, so yeah.
And she would have kind of, I suppose, half reared you, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. Indeed, the
phoning sister
told me that one of them had me on their shoulder and they dropped me on the ground. And of course, making mistakes then, explanations wasn't accepted at all. You got beat, as it was the case at school. If you didn't know the answer to something you were asked, you got beat. Slapped.
Yeah.
That was the answer to everything. Indeed, there was a theory that with boys anyway, you beat them when you see them because they're either going into trouble or coming out of it.
My God, it's comical almost to look back, but it's brutal. And that was right up to, I can remember once getting slapped in our year, but no, nothing like that in primary school, you know. Well, you saw, just quickly harken back to that, there was a guy who used to listen to or read comics.
Oh, indeed, he was I don't know if I should name names here, but no. He was the vice principal's son, and he was a very, very clever lad, as were all of them of that family. And the teacher at the time was ruthless in as much that, you know, but he didn't particularly like kids, in my opinion. Should never have been a teacher, and he certainly didn't like clever kids. Because probably he was more trying to be more than him. But anyway, he observed this chap looking down at his knees, below his desk, and he shouted, "Repeat what I've just been saying." And this chap was able to repeat verbatim everything that he had been saying. And it angered him even more. So we come down, and of course he observed the comic on his knees and beat hell out of him in front of the class, with a cane.
Jesus.
There was no hand, you know, sometimes the hand came out, but it was a cane, and the beatings were not nice now, yeah.
You had good aim with that cane as well, eh?
Yeah. And there's one instance where, you know, the same chap, occasionally I was able to travel home on a bus if you had a couple of pence to pay for it. But mostly you walked to school, which was just over 2 miles, and you walked home. But this day I was on the bus, and on the back of the bus, and a namesake, it wasn't no relation, but this lady got on the bus and he shouted, "Here's watery-eyed Ali." Well, she had eyes that were on water. And she heard it, but she came down and thumped me with her shopping bag. But there was a teacher on the bus who went and said that I had done it. And at break time, I was called into the headmaster, which was the same character that beat the lad that was reading the comic. And without explanation, you hold out your hand. And somebody else counted, I didn't count. I got 22 slaps. And
With a cane?
With a cane on the points of your fingers. And then beat round the legs. But I wouldn't cry. I didn't cry. And that, of course, angered him even more. But you never told anyone, because then the theory was, if you tell that to your parents, they'll say, well, you deserved it. What were you doing to get that? And so I didn't disclose anything to him. But I came out of that, my hands were numb. And this same lad that now, the smart lad, if you like, he was laughing, and I thumped him. And I was lucky that wasn't reported to bring me.
And get another hammering,
to get another handling for that. Since I learned after that lad, he died. He fell off a balcony in Spain, aged 21.
Jesus.
But that was the way things were then. But anyway, I learned a lot later, because I say, my father, wasn't. He didn't suffer fools, I can tell you. And indeed, a lad I spoke to recently, they said they were afraid of him. I said, so were we. But he anyway went into the headmaster. Someone told him about me getting slapped. And I don't know what happened, but...
there was no recurrence?
I'd say he was invited outside or whatever, Because fighting, that was the answer to everything,
When you joined the army then, what was the premise or the thought process, or what was your...
Well, I can tell you now...
Besides the escaping the...
My father's told me, over his dead body, I joined the British Army.
Right.
And he was in the artillery.
He was in the Royal Artillery, we should say.
Yes, he was in the artillery, and he was stationed in Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq.
Yeah.
And they were fighting the Turks or whatever, out there somewhere. But
he never spoke about that when he came back, did he?
Very, very little.
Yeah.
Very, very little. He would speak now and again about the diet, or lack of it. Dog biscuits that they ate, and were hard as, you needed great teeth. Malaria was a massive problem, and quinine was given to them fairly neat, and he believed that took the teeth out of his head, or rotted them, and
Jesus.
Even he said the hair of his head. But so after the treatment I received in Lisnaskea and that, I got in my head I was going to join the Irish Army with a view that I learn all about guns, and I'd come back and take the toll on the boys that
the detectives?
These be specials and these boys around Newton Butler. Because there's one, to give you a better example of that, you do have to get a few shillings, you know what I mean, because money was very scarce. We were poor. And a particular farmer, anyway, and I was out working on the hay, helping with the hay. And I went into Newton Butler, and I was coming back out at night, and of course you had to have a light on your bicycle, and then there was this B Special Patrol stopped me, they waved you down with a red light, and I stopped. And I immediately, the man that spoke to me says, what's your name? And I knew his voice had been working with him that day. I said, I named the man, I said, Bertish, you know me, he says. And he had his gun, rifle, and he manoeuvred it. He says, I asked you your effing name. So I was pretty bitter. And I that's how I joined one of the reasons why. But I soon learned that wasn't a good idea either.
Yeah. You met somebody, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I met a lad that was in Brookborough. Yeah.
On that lorry was south in O'Hanlon?
Yeah, yes. And he was in the Irish Army. But his brother was a lieutenant in the Irish Army. And he was found to be a member then. Because when I joined the Irish Army, you had to take an oath. You were not, or any part of any illegal organisation. And he did as well. But he was found to have been, he was in the IRA. And he was drummed out of Collins Barracks. Which, that's now Collins Barracks, which is now a museum in Dublin, right? There in Ormond Quay.
Stripped and frog bashed out the front.
They ripped the epaulets which is two bars on your shoulder.
Sure.
They cut them off, right? The Sam Brown comes off, and the drum is beaten, and you're walked out the gate.
Oh, it's ceremonial, is it?
You better believe it.
My God.
Yeah, drummed them out, but his brother, he was a soldier, yeah, and O'Brien was his other names, yeah, and he told me, he was able to tell me because he latched onto me with a northern accent, where I was from and all that carry on. As I said earlier, I was 4 mile. I was in Lisnaskea, 4 mile, and it's about 4 mile from Brooper. On the night that happened, as I say, on New Year's Eve, it was a very cold night. When you sup with the devil, you need a long spoon, they say. Aye. But I learned, that this fellow O'Brien, when he told me, he says, stay clear. Stay clear, he said. And he started giving me information on the organisation.
Yeah.
He's seen it then.
Oh, here. Crazy times, hey. But you met some characters then in the army, I suppose.
There was no scarce of them. They were from all counties, including the north, Armagh, Belfast, and so on. I don't know, unbelievable characters. There was one particular guy he was from the dock originally anyway, but I met him in artillery in Kildare. His name was Tom Flanagan. Well, Tom was, they call him, a born soldier. Well, my definition of that is you had to be half an idiot as well. It helped to be one of those, you did everything by the book. And I've always taken the view on most things that a lot of these rules are made for the guidances of the wise and the blind obedience of fools.
Like Tom Flanagan.
Yes. But anyway, Tom, as I say, he was like a real character of a man. He got a wee motorbike, and he was, of course, I was in Kildare Barracks at the time, which was called McGee. My initial training was 6 months, and that was in McKee, K-E-E, in Black Horse Avenue, Dublin. And that was the artillery. And I was started down to Kildare. Great. I enjoyed that. Kildare is a lovely place. But that's where I met Flanagan. But
is there some story about the barracks in Dublin, or the design of it?
Oh, yes.
The Brits
the Key Barracks Dublin, the drawings for that barracks was supposed to be built in India. Because you must remember, all these barracks, not Kildare, but all those barracks in Dublin, they're all built by the British. They were there when they got independence. So the drawing for that, apparently, was, and you can see it, the turrets and everything else, you know what I mean, the design. And of course, the other drawing, it went to India. And so that's where that barracks was built. And they're out of place, yeah, that was McKee Barracks, Black Horse Avenue. But as I say, Flanagan, the born soldier, but he would do everything by the book and all that. But he used to act the idiot as well, He had a powerful sense of humour. You couldn't really dislike the man, and he was a single man. And then, of course, we went to the Congo. That was the United Nations.
Yeah.
And Flanagan, anyway, went to the Congo, and he was a sergeant. And he had a platoon. And, of course, he behaved the same out there as he did at home.
Which would have been joking and playing pranks.
Aye, but more than that, he was marching soldiers up and down, and I believe, you're talking about 90, 100 degrees of heat. And we were wearing what the uniform we referred to was the bull's wool. It was all wool. And the tropical gear apparently hadn't arrived, and he's and you have to imagine a soldier with a rifle on his shoulder and swing up those arms and march left, right, and all this.
Through the jungle.
So I got to a guy, one of the guys, and he took a Mills 36 hand grenade and threw it under Flanagan's bed, taking the two legs off below the knee and putting a lot of shrapnel in 3 or 4 other boys that were in the billet that he was in, He was very fortunate, Flanagan, I understand, because there was a helicopter on site. I'm not sure if it was Leopoldville at the time or Elizabethville. They got him to the hospital anyway. And Flanagan, he eventually arrived back in the infirmary in there beside Phoenix Park. There's the military hospital. So did the boy that threw the grenade, because he was deemed to have a nervous breakdown. But anyway, there was these. Flanagan was fitted out with prosthetic legs and what have you. I told him, he said, you'll be great as new. He says, you'll be able to dance and do everything. And Flanagan says, they must be damn good because I couldn't dance with the ones I had. That was the kind of humour that man had. They got him a job then in a harp brewery in Dundalk, I understand. I never seen him after that. Yeah.
Never seen him after that. And he used to ride a motorcycle, is that right?
I was able to get it was a 250cc 2-stroke Adler motorbike, German. And again, I didn't have a helmet, or anything like that. But I remember coming into Kildare town, it was frosty, and the next thing I knew, the bike was laying beside me, and I just left me, And the first thing I did was, you're conscious of who's seen this. So it was about 11 o'clock at night, and I picked the bike up anyway, and there's a couple of things, handlebar bent and something like that. That was it. I got rid of it because there was quite a few fellas killed back home on motorbikes that could afford them then. My father's opinion of a motorbike was a coffin on wheels.
Mm-hmm. He's right.
I got rid of the motorbike anyway, and that was it, yeah.
Organ donors. Everybody calls them organ donors. Yeah. And I can't remember his name, or was it 10 to 4? Or?
Oh, that was another Hannah. He was, they reckon his feet, I never seen this, but it was at the 10 to 4, the way his feet was shaped, It was 10, one on the left was at 10, the others were up at 4, other side. But Hannah, he was famous, apparently, he opened up with a Brand gun on a tripod on planes, on the German planes that were flying over.
The Nazis?
They added to the thing, I guess. The planes were flying over, you know what I mean, they were going to dump the bombs or something. But Flanagan opened up with, what came out of a Brand gun, there was 36 rounds in a magazine of a Brand gun. And,
But
there were 303 rounds. I mean, they'd be like
deer rifle
hitting a plane, unless they were damn lucky, they're not. But anyway, the theory was that because he fired it, the planes turned around and bombed Dublin. But I find that hard to believe.
You never know. It's still a good story.
He taught the driving course. I went on the driving course for it at the time. 22 weeks it lasted. Because you had to learn, crazy stuff, you mean. You had to learn even how to ride a motorbike on that driving course. But you had to also learn everything about the mechanics of the thing and strip an engine down. All the vehicles then were Ford V8 engines in them. And I never forgot the firing order of a Ford V8 engines, 15486372.
That's the cylinder firing order of a Ford V8 truck.
Two numbers went, including my own number. You never forget your...
Yeah, what was your...
806901.
Your army soldier number.
And I left the army as a corporal in 1964.
7 years, is that long?
No, I was 5.5. A commandant came and said there was a man looking for someone to manage their hire drive. Herbie Chapman was Herbie Chapman was the owner of that garage. It was a British Leyland garage. He sold famous or infamous for 1100s Morris Minors, MG Magnetes, Rileys and stuff like that, and you did other work going up to Britain's and Dublin and bringing down cars and engines and different things like that. But mainly in the summer, you were very busy. I'd be going to all sorts of places, Dublin Airport, meeting Americans, giving them cars, hire drives. So
brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was brilliant or not, but
there's just to pin on one more story. There was some madman used to be in the army. He used to get drunk a lot, was it? Or I know he lifted 2 military police.
It wouldn't be. Well, you see, it was an offence to drink even. You weren't allowed in the army then to go out and drink in uniform.
Right.
Now, when I joined the army, your civilian attire was taken and put in a small canvas type kit bag and rolled up because you wouldn't recognise it when you got it back. But you didn't get it back for 6 months because it was 6 months training. The training was good. There's no question about it. I remember when I got into my civilian attire after using a smoothing iron to smooth out all the wrinkles that was in the damn things that I'd given to them. But I remember walking down Black Horse Avenue and there was a privet hedge and I knew if I sprang I could jump over it. I felt that fit. I was so light. Yeah.
Amazing.
But there was another, I'll not go into names. He was an absolute. There was two, and there was at least maybe even three brothers, and they were from Dundalk as well. But he had been down the town. He was the type of boy. He was known to have he'd stand outside the post office and if he was sitting in a tire, throw a cap down and sing to get money. But he was walking down the Ormond Quay, past the four courts there, back to barracks, and these two military police, PAs, observed him, and of course he had a few drinks on him, and he was in disarray, the uniform, and you weren't dressed, you had to be dressed properly, and creasing your trousers and all that carry on, smartly dressed, boots polished. Anyway, we'll just say John wasn't, but he was a big strong bloke. And these two boys, anyway, apprehended him at the wall and thing. And I'm not sure, I think it was one of them he put in the liffey.
Just tossed him,
he thumped them, and he put one of them in the liffey. And he was fortunate. The man there was ladders out of that liffey. And it was at that point where he went in, the public was able to climb out of it. Because there was no to save him. Because you're going down about 10 foot.
Aye.
Because depending on the tide, the tide coming, it's tidal. But he went to the Congo when he was killed.
Gee.
Yeah. But he was a fearless type of character.
Was that the boy who was swinging the bicycle and
that was the boy. That was the boy, and that was in Drogheda. And I was coming through from Cavan in a lorry, and having worked with the FCA. That was the territorial type part of the army. There were civilians, but they did, military, if they were ever needed to be called up. And we called them FCA, the Irish, but anyway, we had the Free Clothing Association. Because some of these characters in the FCA had come in with all muck on their boots, you know what I mean? They were using the uniform and using the gear to farm or to work, or, you had an awful job with them. But anyway, I was coming through from Cavan, and here I see your man. And he was swinging his bike, because we were there in Gormanstown. We had to go to Gormanstown. I was stationed in Gormanstown for 2 or 3 months because of the summer. That was the summer camp, And anyway, John was he was in the middle of the street in Drogheda, and they were narrow streets then. You had to go through Drogheda. There was no bypass, and he was swinging the street. And I don't know how many. There was 4 or 5 of these boys in it, but he was, come on, and there he was. And he fired the bike up into the back. I slowed down. He seen me. I slowed down anyway, stopped, and he jumped into the back of the lorry, and I
horsed it up the hill
out of there.
A steep enough hill in Drogheda. Well, I mean, before going any further into that, I suppose a profound question, or a deeper question: would you, given all your experiences up until that point, would you prefer to have been a child of then, as you were, or given all that you know about what's gone on since and what's going on today, would you rather be a child of today?
Well, I can only judge that from observations.
Yeah,
I would say child today. It used to be used to us. You don't know you're living. There's just no comparison whatsoever. The opportunity a child has today is unbelievable. There was no opportunities, even with education, you didn't get it. You didn't get opportunities then. It was very rural, very remote. By the way, if you lived in Fermanagh today, you'd still be fairly remote, although there are a lot more opportunities in that area than there were then. You worked on a farm, if you could get a job, and that would be seasonal. My father had a job, as I say, in the railway. That was permanent. The railway used to take on temporary workers, and for work that had to be done in the better months, with laying new tracks or renewing the track or whatever. But there's just no comparison whatsoever to a child today. The opportunity you have today, although you can see, there's some disadvantages, but there's no. Although I find it very strange that people are hungry. We were poor. My father, as I say, worked night and day, and he had all the crops, everything. He had wind, the turf, the hay. We had goats, we had milk. We were never hungry.
Yeah,
and there's children today, I understand, are hungry.
Well, I don't know what the current figure is in Northern Ireland or the UK, but I just know from stats that 1 in 5 kids is in food poverty in the US, which is a crime. It's the richest nation, or could be.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you could lament all that all day, absolutely. Did your mother, she used to, I don't know if she used to, but they used to buy, was it smuggled flour and butter from over the
Well,
border?
you see, then the war, because Ireland was neutral, Southern Ireland's Republic was neutral in the war, they had, lots of things were not cheaper. Cigarettes, one. You couldn't smuggle. You had, when you went into Clonus, you passed a Northern Customs and a Southern Customs. There was approximately half a mile between the two of them. And they would check you going in from the north if you were bringing, although that was rare because there was so much advantage to get stuff in the south and bring it north. Yes, there was people that I had known men to carry a 4-stone bag of flour at night on the railway line. And you walk in the sleepers, right? Because obviously no trains at that time of night, but and they might have got I think, paid a half a crown for that, for doing that. 2 and 6, right? And 2 shillings and 6, which is what, 30 pence.
2 shillings, well, I suppose a shilling's...
That was that, but that was the money then anyway, you know what I mean? There was 200 and what? Was it 240 pence in a pound? So it was 8 half crowns in a pound. Something like that.
How the hell did it ever work?
Crazy money. But, and butter, of course, again, massive, cigarettes. And there was one incident, I recall, I accompanied my mother. And with a customs man, he would come on, and he wasn't, no, but anyway, they would say, if there was anybody, and there was often people, especially on a Saturday night, and buses were very infrequent, maybe 1 or 2 a day. And if there was anybody standing on the bus that wasn't obviously seen, all out that are standing, and people got out, and he went through the bags of the people on that bus and would have done the same on the people coming back into the bus that were standing outside. And I remember seeing a man, and he had cigarettes came then in 20 packets, and you could get obviously 200 pack cartons. And he put them under the wheel of the bus, and they wedged in between the wheels. It was double wheel in the back of the bus, and he put them there. And the language wasn't good. He says he's not getting them, you know. And but there was some powerful stories. There was one incident, a wicker of one really, where the guy when you had a car, those that had one, you had to get your book stamped going in and coming out. It's called a triptych.
Right.
Now, and if you were staying late, you get notice of that, and the customs man had to stay. If it was 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning when you were given whatever it get you. But this guy anyway was coming out, and he called in with his book, and there was this notorious, a lot named customs man, and notorious as much that he would take anything from you if you no. But anyway, your man said to me, he says, look, he says, I'll see you okay, he says, but tomorrow night I'm bringing out a few things. He says, will it be okay? Not a problem. So anyway, your man stamped the book and away he went. The following evening, and we came out, and as he approached the customs post to get his book stamped, 2 men met him, walked out. And when he went in, the spy says to him, he says, you're never going to believe it, he says, they're checking cars tonight. And they turned that car inside out, but sure, there was nothing.
He'd got it, too.
Anyway, he left it in that, and God, so he made a point of going there the next court, and the man said, oh, Christ, he says, you were lucky. And he said, what was that stuff you told me you were going to bring out? You were so lucky. He says, they didn't find it. Oh, he says, they wouldn't have found it. He says, the night I asked you, he says, that's the night I brought it out.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's fantastic. Welcome back to the second part of this whatever number of part series of a life history of somebody from rural Fermanagh that ended up being my father for all his sins, I suppose. So moving on to the next part, you moved to, or migrated, I suppose it would have been then, to Birmingham. Not quite as far as some of your rest of your family.
Absolutely not. You know, as I say, my brother went to Zambia, 2 sisters to England, and one of them went eventually to Australia, and then obviously the 2 sisters went to America, where they still are. You know, there's 3 of us left now. Now I moved to Birmingham from the hairdryer job that I was in Kildare. I didn't see any prospects in that. You know, I thought there'd be more opportunity, and I had a sister in Birmingham, Rosaline, and her husband Jerry, and I was always invited there if I wanted to make a new start. And in November 1964, I went there, and I actually got a job. Her husband was a pattern fitter in Dunlop, the tyres. You know, that is the thread, fitting the pieces that give you the thread design on your tire. Right. And he got me a job down there making tubes.
Right.
Yeah, tubes. There was inners. They were all tubes then. There was no such thing as tubeless.
Yeah.
And I stuck that. It wasn't it was shifts, you know, and it wasn't a great job. It wasn't a healthy job either. And eventually I came out of that and I got a job in car sales, because I had been associated with motors and that in the hire drive and all that. Mm-hmm. And it was Bristol Street Motors, which is then, maybe still, the biggest Ford car dealer in Britain. And they opened a second-hand supermarket on Coventry Road, Birmingham, called Cardrome. Mm. And I got a job there, as I say, that had about 300 cars on 3 floors, all second-hand, for sale on that. And I got a job there, and then got another job in sales in shop fittings, Lancashire. But it was all precarious. And I had engineering skills from the army, working with guns and all this carry on. And I got an opportunity to do a welding course. There's a government training centre there, and they're now defunct, but it was a wonderful opportunity I got anyway, and I took advantage of it. And I went on then when I got out of that, got a job on a high pressure welding in a factory in Birmingham, Chester Street, Birmingham, Aston, Birmingham. Hence Aston Villa. Yeah. Aston Villa. And
who you're a fan of?
Called GKN Burwelco. And learned an awful lot there. And eventually got into the sort of pipe welding with Babcock, and Wilcox was the name of the firm, and Eaton Pipes Derby. And probably the rest is history in that regard. I went on, to work for 14 odd years, travelling the country to various power stations, nuclear power stations in the latter end, coal-fired power stations initially. This one there featured, you see it quite often. It's a landmark up in Doncaster called Drax. I was there for a while, but Dungeness and nuclear power stations, Tross fitted in Wales and so on.
It was fairly intricate work. The work had to be.
We were Lloyd's coated welders. It was hard getting there in a sense, because you had to take these tests, and you were approved by Lloyd's to weld the specific pipes, and when I mean specific, the thickness of the pipe, and down to the material of the pipe. And if you weren't welding them continuously, you'd have to be retested. If they thought you hadn't got the experience working with that particular thing, they would offer a retest. And you're brought into the welding school in a place called Tipton, near Wolverhampton, there. And you would maybe spend a week, 2 weeks, and where a Lloyd's inspector then would observe what you were doing, and then he would stamp the test piece, which had to be then bent test, X-rayed, you name it. And then you went on to weld these pipes, but they're like probably nothing that most people will see, unless you're working on it, being on a power station, like say a Ballylumford or whatever. When I started out with them pipes, the main steam pipe coming from the turbine was 4 inches thick. That was a week's welding for one person. using 6 gauge and indeed 4 gauge. That's 1/4 inch thick rods. Okay, and that had to be right.
So the pipe was 6 inches thick. What diameter?
No, the pipe was 4 inches thick.
Or sorry,
the 16 inch. So that was 8 inch bore.
that's crazy.
8 inch. That was coming off the turbine. They narrowed down then as they came down, but they were all at least 2 inches thick all the way right, to the turbine.
And that was that for? There was nuclear power stations as well. That was
nuclear power station we were on. Actually, the one in Dungeness B was the main steam pipe was stainless steel. You imagine the cost of that, like, and those pipes were, I think, as I recall, with metallurgical advances, the pipe thickness came down drastically over the years. And I'm thinking it was about 1.25 inches thick, the stainless steel pipe. But then stainless were a lot more strong. The material of the pipes then, the mild steel pipes as they called them, but they were chrome molybdenum. That was the name of that was the material.
Okay.
It could take a lot, and high tensile steels all used in that type of work.
you still lived in Birmingham and would have driven or whatever?
Oh, I would drive to, well, that was to Kent, Dungeness was away down near, Folkestone.
And what car were you driving then?
I was driving, I was driving a Volkswagen Beetle, YRF 481C.
Registration.
Yes, 65. C was 65. D 66 and so on.
So you'd have a migraine by the time you got to Kent?
Yeah, you would. You had to be drumming, because it was right on the channel. And a lot of times when you get there, the old foghorn would be going because they suffer an awful lot of fog on the channel, But yeah, what's this song of, as I was going over the Cork and Kerry mountains, who was the rock singer that sang that? I forget.
Phil Lynott.
Phil Lynott. I used to listen. That was fantastic. But it was radio then, I didn't have a tape or anything.
Yeah, not even an 8-track or anything.
Not at all, no.
Tell the full story about it. It's a hugely interesting story in anybody's life, I suppose. When you were working in Kent, you would already have. Well, were you already married then?
Yes.
To
Margaret Rose,
my mother, and you had a house in Birmingham.
We had a flat. It's called a masonette.
And she was a civil servant then?
She was working in Birmingham Centre, a civil servant, yeah.
And, you got married in the Abbey? In
the Abbey in 1970, yeah.
In Birmingham?
Yeah.
What do you call it? In Sutton Coldfield?
No, it was Erdington. Sutton Road, Erdington, yeah.
And that was Father Tony married you guys there, so...
No?
Father Tony Haycock?
Sorry, you're right, yes, I forgot, yeah. I was thinking, yeah, of course it was, yeah, Father Tony.
Aye, and his father played for Villa, isn't that right?
He did, Haycock, Tony Haycock.
Well, anyway, so you just to set the scene, you lived in Birmingham. Mum she was working there, and you would have been working in Kent. So I'm trying to set up the background for the story about the guy you picked up.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah.
It was you can tell a story, but it was, where were you coming from, or what was the...
We were on the A5. I forget where we were coming from. We'd left the M6, and I was on the A5, and we were coming into Wolverhampton, and it was really lashing rain. And there was this man thumbing a lift, and I wasn't for stopping, but Margaret shouted, "Oh, try to stop the poor man, look at him." And anyway, so I stopped, reversed back, and Margaret got into the back seat
of the Beetle,
and he got in the front. And from the moment he got in, he stank. But you could tell from his accent or his vocabulary, he was fairly educated. And anyway, we brought him home, and his clothes was wringing, and he got some of my clothes, shirt and everything else. And he...
So what was his story?
His story said he had been to way up in Scotland at a quarry. He was an archaeologist. His Land Rover was stolen. His clothes and all his gear, everything was in the Land Rover was stolen, and he only had what he stood up in. We found this very suspicious, but he could be telling the truth. Anyway, he stayed. We came in that night, but that night we made him a meal. There was a couple of people who were teachers there at the time. I forget their names, but a young couple like ourselves, and we went down and we said we'd go out for a pint at the local pub. It was called the Digby on Chester Road, Erdyton. And of course he came with us, but he had no money.
Stolen.
Yeah, he had no money at all. But anyway, he had a couple of pints, thing. But this teacher fella, he'd come from Manchester, and he started talking about that area. This boy could talk about any subject.
Right.
He was a bright, clever man.
Astute, yeah.
And he knew this doctor this chap was talking about in Manchester.
Okay.
And he was able to, your man says, Christ, he knows everything. He can't be bluffing at that, So which hardened, will keep him the night and so on.
And he was supposedly like a professor or something, archaeologist.
Well, yeah, archaeologist, but anyway, he said when he came in initially, when he got changed of clothes and everything else, look, he says, I'm also an artist. He says, I would like to do a sketch of your wife. Of course, she refused point blank, wouldn't do it. Well, she said, well, you do it. So I sat down, and he had a stub of a pencil, I would say 2 inches long, and A4 sheet of paper,
which we still have.
And he started sketching, and you've seen that pictures there in the house today.
I'll post a picture of it up.
What he did, and anyway, then he went to bed, and I say we had very little. Christ almighty, and he. I was very conscious of him to the point where I put a chair up in the door, of our bedroom. He was in the other bedroom, because there's only 2 bedrooms in the place. And anyway, it's okay. I seen him off the premises anyway, and because I had to go back to Kent, and he did make some contact, or tried to make some contact about coming back.
He would have inadvertently
on another occasion, and Margaret Rose told him, "You can't come back on that occasion. My husband won't be here, but when he is here a week later," it was the FA Cup final, right? So that had to be around May time, when that took place. And so anyway, that was the last we heard of him, until we found there was a woman murdered in Oxford. And transpires it was him.
That was like in the September.
This boy came from Cornwall initially, and that's how we were able to tie it up. Margaret Rose went into the Birmingham Mail to trace the thing.
Yeah.
But he apparently he was a bloody vagrant, well-educated one, albeit, but that was it.
Jesus, that gives me chills.
Yeah.
Now you're thinking about
that. But no, I wasn't afraid of him. Physically, I'd have been able for him, to try anything. But it gave me some concern to think that she was on her own and I was away because I was away in Kent for 6 weeks at a time.
Yeah,
I didn't get home.
He would have been sort of through conversation privy to that information, probably.
Oh, absolutely.
Too. Innocent conversation. Yeah. I remember Mum saying that he had rang and said, I need to come back and finish off that drawing.
Something like that, yeah.
And if you see the drawing, it's finished. It's
finished.
There's nothing to do.
He was an excellent artist.
And she says, well, sure. Oh, well, Fergus will not be here the weekend or something. He goes, I don't need him to be there to finish it. And she thought, the hell with that. Yeah. You're not getting back here. Wow, what a miss, eh? Somebody else, unfortunately. Jesus. Had to bear the brunt of his brutality, eh?
Yeah.
What was it that decided to make you come back to the north?
Well, it was, I was a firstborn. Richard was severely handicapped, which he was born in 1978 in Good Hope Hospital. Not a good name for that place, but anyway, in Sutton Coldfield. And being the firstborn, we had no knowledge, of what was behaviour and what was not good behaviour from a particular child, But anyway, he started having fits, and I think it was 9 months, or maybe before that. And phenobarbital was the drug used. I'll never forget. But there was a doctor, a paediatrician there, and we were told lies, quite frankly. That's what it comes down to, he's just a lazy child, he'll be grand, and so on. but of course he wasn't. But anyway, again, as I say, I was working at that time with Babcock International, and your mother had seen great operations carried out, or not seen the actual operation, but reports of great operation had been carried out on soldiers who had brain damage through the troubles, through the bombing and all that carry on. British soldiers in the Royal. And she had just this,
Convinced.
Something could be done for him, but for Richard. But I had no such illusions about that. Anyway, I always wanted to come back, and probably she too, because when we would come home in the summer, and that was what we were talking about. We were coming home.
Yeah.
And when we were going back, we were leaving home.
Yeah.
To go home, you know what I mean? It was a crazy... And I just seen the environment there going downhill.
Yeah.
Not least by the volume of people and so on. But so anyway, Babcock asked me to come over to Ballylongford. The boiler had gone on fire, and there was major work to be done, about 9 months' work. And anyway, I had little persuading to do, and I came back. It was a 78, 79. Anyway, but anyway, I came back and worked at Ballylongford and stayed with brother-in-law Eugene and Vera, and and with a total view of coming right back altogether.
Yeah.
And we did. We came back in March 79, and we got a house in what became a rather infamous place, Rathenraw. But it was a lovely place, house-wise and everything like that. And we did have to use even the complaints of Richard to go higher up on the scale to get that house.
To even get the house.
Because he was never going to get better. We went and we met a Professor Nevin in Belfast Royal Hospital, and he told us, he says, look, what's happened here is negligence.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, at birth. And I was at the birth, and I knew then exactly what he was saying. And he said it's progressive. And another man, Dr. Swallow, confirmed that. And well, I wasn't stupid then, but when she heard that, what did he mean by progressive?
Yeah.
And I said, it's just not going to get better. And anyway, as I say, he passed away at age 4.
Mm.
And I remember driving in the M2 and praying for his death.
Mm. Jesus.
Because he was in such a bad way,
Relief.
But that's... but then you came along and...
The special one. Bare arse. And
but that's life, and... Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose then I was like kept well protected and
well, you see,
coddled,
from your conception or at birth, there was a doctor in the Royal took over. You were born
because of that history.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was no negligence there.
Yeah.
But no, that's you got special treatment.
I have most people hate hospitals, but I have a fond memories of the Royal. Like even when I was 4, even when they were.
It's a good hospital.
Giving me,
it's still a bloody good hospital.
Ripping me tonsils out and putting me adenoids and vents in. Like I still remember that, and not in a bad way at all. And then they cut half a 3D V shape out of my mouth to pull a tooth down one time as well.
Yeah, oh God,
had to knock me out for that.
Yeah.
But I still don't. It's still fond memories of good people,
The orthodontist did as well.
Yeah,
braces on your teeth.
Yeah, they were great people.
No, you have very good treatment here. That's one thing about it. Too many people. That when you were born, that was the 23rd of December. Sorry, Richard was born.
Yeah.
It's like what they used to say when you got a bad car, usually British Lane, it was a Monday car,
Yeah. Christmas time.
Yeah, there was, I don't know how many children born that night and in that hospital. But anyway.
Skeletal stuff.
I never seen a doctor, that's for sure. And I was there for the whole thing.
It's crazy. Aye, and then sure, it's not even worth the. Yeah, I've watched documentaries on people that go after them, and sure, it's not worth the
Well, we
fucking-
didn't know to go after them. We could have.
well, I mean,
we
that's,
really could.
it could have been 20 years of that then with fucking.
But we were back here with, and that was a wonderful man, that genealogist, Prof. Nevin, as they called him. He told us the truth.
Yeah.
And they also told us that it was 1 in 4 not to have any more children. Good hope. The chances of it happening were 1 in 4. And again, Nevin just dismissed that nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you just came home then, eh? Well, I'm really glad to have been raised here. You know.
Oh, absolutely.
I know even people I've grown up with here that then went to get educated in England and had a kid there, and for the first 3 years raised the kid there, and they were like, absolutely not. We're not
Absolutely
raising
not.
a child in this country.
I can tell you now, with my sister, when I stayed with my sister Rosalind, girls from here, maybe these folk here will know what I'm talking about that are listening to us right now. Patsy McKenna married Stan Heron. She stayed with Rosalind at times. Another lady that died there recently, Bernadette, her maiden name was Kelly. Her sister, Fidelma, is here, lives in this town.
All right.
Yeah, okay? Mm-hmm. Sheena Heaney, Seamus's sister, right? We used to go to all the parties. She was in the school with my sister.
And she lived in, or they had digs together?
Those 3 girls, I'm not sure if they trained there or trained here and went there to work. I'm really not sure. Well, either way, they all came back and married sweethearts from here. Childhood sweethearts.
Yeah.
Those 3 of them. So I know Patsy's gone, Sheena's gone, and now Bernadette died there about 6-8 weeks ago.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I just jumping in on that story, Sheena, who was Sheena McCormick when I met her, I was in we were in the Rapparees then.
Yeah.
And we'd done a gig in Longford and came back up, and we'd done a gig in Lavey, just as off the cuff. We just played in the pub, and Sheena was there, and I'd sang a John Prine song, and she said, "Do you know this? Do you know?" I think it was Sam Stone. Yeah. She said, "Do you know that?" And I said, "I actually don't, but I'll learn it for the next time I'm back here, and I'll play it for you."
Right.
And I still didn't know who she was then, and I went home and told you. And you were thinking, Sheena McCoy. It was then you kind of, the cogs started turning. I think, God, Sheena Heaney.
Yeah. Because I remember, yeah. She married, I think it was a solicitor, McCormick from Mahara.
Aye. And her daughter Mary passed on the family genes, a lovely girl. And I think she's actually married now too. At the next gig we were at in Lavey, I played it. It was in this interval. I played Sam Stone and didn't know if she was there, but I just said, "This is for Sheena." And then they came up to introduce themselves, and we've been friends ever since. Her son and daughter. Sure. Yeah, how the world turns.
Yeah.
It was only then that I figured out, or you told me that she stayed with Rosaline. Well, there you are. Hey. Well, I think.
That's about it. As I say, we came back in 1979, and yeah, I always intended coming back because home is home.
You were always a homeboy. You came
it's
home
not so
from
much
holiday.
home. It was the environment.
Yeah.
You know, we don't appreciate what we have here.
Yeah.
The freedom. I mean, you at Birmingham, even then, you had to plan your journey at any time of the day. Can't go there. Chocker.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't do it. There's not. I don't think there's a place in Ireland where you could say, "I won't be there at a certain time."
Maybe Enniskillen.
Driving even normal.
At school time, but that's about it, yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. You
could go out in Birmingham and you could be caught in a traffic jam and you could be there for hours. As simple as that.
And there's nearly twice as many people in London as there is on this entire island. It's just crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. Aye, so you'd rather be a child of today than what you were.
There's no comparison. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the people that when you were, if you were poor, and most people were, the majority were poor. There was no other help.
That was it.
That was it.
Go hungry.
You wanted out. You couldn't go to. There was no food bags. There was nothing.
That's maybe not the answer. No, I'm not, and I'm not discounting. That's maybe not the answer. A lot of people listening my age, certainly not the answer that I would have said.
But in the rural area, there was no such thing as bin lorries.
Or
There
street
was
lights.
no waste.
No street lights.
No. They referred to the heap for we kept hens. We kept everything down. You know, we were most of the year self-sufficient. And everything went out, it was called the duchel.
Yeah.
That's obviously Irish. But, and as I say, my father, he set all the crops, everything, potatoes, peas, beans, lettuce, onion. He won the turf, the hay for the goats. That was all thing. There was nothing wasted, nothing.
Brilliant.
So that's it. We're in clover for the most part. Even when you see today, imagine the government doing what it's doing, pouring money, billions. It's going to be borrowed. It's going to have to be paid back, but it's a massive. It's kept an awful lot of people afloat.
Yeah,
and it'll, as I say, we'll pay for it, or usually will, and somewhere maybe others will many years from now. But there was nothing like that at all.
No support.
It just wouldn't have happened.
Get
End of
by,
story.
get high, get strange.
Yeah. You didn't have it, you wanted it out.
Yeah. Well, I am very grateful for you giving up your time and afternoon to come and talk.
Oh, not a problem. I'll send you the bill later.
I'm also very grateful for our production team,
yes,
Keeleen and Nathan,
Thank you.
and for being so hospitable. And hopefully we can do this with other conversation or with other guests. You got your dust mask there. Let's say it's for grinding, isn't it? That's our safety mask for our pandemic.
Yeah,
mask.
those are masks. Yes. Well, you see, I'm ahead of the game now. Those are all British standard. You see that 6016.
All right.
Masks. As a fellow says, I didn't recognise you without your mask.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Oh, well, it's home, boys, home. Home I like to be, home for a while in the old country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree, they're all a growing green in the north country.